Hey Cornelius, you talked with passion about Royal Ascot in the last part there. Now you've delved into ownership a bit. Was there anything of that level?
Oh no, no. I always joke that that the Sheikhs have Royal Ascot. JP McManus has Cheltenham. Aintree is a great event as well, and I have Perth. And in terms of festivals, and the Perth Festival is my absolute favourite week of the whole year. Perth Festival takes place in April, and I have had 2 winners at Perth festivals over the years. A horse called Bourdonnais, ridden by an amateur jockey called Chris Bonner in the mid-1990s, Mr. C. Bonner. That horse was Bourdonnais. He won 4 races in under 12 months. Never won again, actually. But in that time, he won 18,000 quid in the mid-90s. And subsequently, when people have grumbled about, I don't grumble about prize money because any ownership I'm involved in is utterly just as a hobby. But I appreciate that prize money is very important to a lot of people. So the mighty Bourdonnais, as we used to call him, Mr. C. Bonner, he won his 4th and final race for me at Perth, and then I didn't have another winner at Perth. Actually, I had a minor winner at Perth called Lion Guest, trained by Susan Bradburn and the Bradburn family. There was Susan and Johnny. She was a trainer. Johnny, Mr. J. Bradburn, he was an amateur rider. And Mark Bradburn, their son, was a professional jockey. And Lorna, their daughter, is a trainer, became a trainer in Ireland as Mrs. Lorna Fowler. She married a chap called Harry Fowler. And they were big mates, and we had a number of horses with them. Very grand of me, I was involved in a number of horses with them. One of them won at Perth, which was very exciting. And then another, a horse called Almere Dulier, was a mudlark who had a mind of his own. And his form figures, it was as though we were up to something. His form figures every year used to be P, 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 might have been the odd R in there, but certainly mainly Ps. But every year he used to get to Ayr at the end of February. And it was something about Ayr. His ears pricked, and off he went. And he won the same. If you're, I'm sure you're okay with my language here, but I always describe it. I always said to Susan, everyone said to Henrietta Knight, how fantastic to win the Cheltenham Gold Cup 3 years running with Best Mate. You have won the same race for shit horses in shit ground for shit money at Ayr at the end of February in shit weather. You did it for that 3 years running. That is one of the great training performances of all time. And every year people seem to, after it happened the first time, people seem to work it out. Or it certainly wasn't me, because we were the subject of quite big gambles then, the second year and the third year. So the form figures used to go PPPPP 1, PPPP 1, PPP 1. And then on the third time, she rang, I wasn't there, and she rang and she said, because the horse hadn't been that well, I said, I think, why don't we call it a day now? And she said, it's the best news you've ever given me. Then I've had other winners at Perth. When Susan Bradburn retired, I got involved with the Alexander family, who were great trainers at a place called Kynaston, which is sort of Kinross in the middle of Scotland, or middle of the south part of Scotland, southern half of Scotland, and had a lot of fun with horses there, funnily enough, at Perth and also at Ayr again. So Ayr has been quite a lucky track, involved with a horse called Craig and Boy that must have been, I could probably walk to Ayr on his own because he's been there so often, and he won a couple of races at Ayr, and it was the other owners are friends, the trainer's friend, the jockey, a fellow called Grant Coburn, doesn't get as many opportunities perhaps as he should do. And so when things work out on those occasions, it's absolutely fantastic. I was talking earlier on about misplaced enthusiasm and being a cheerleader. This is genuine. This isn't misplaced enthusiasm. This is just the love of the other side of what we all do. And it's probably a bit expensive and it's probably a ridiculous extravagance, but my God, it's good fun.
Now, you've obviously like racecourses in Scotland. Do any of those feature in your book, which we must mention?
You happen to... Oh, just, World Racecourses by Cornelius Lysaght. No, I'm slightly ashamed there aren't any Scottish courses in there, but it was 100 racecourses from around the world. So maybe there'll have to be a volume 2. But the thing about Scotland, people say, why, you live in the south of England. You haven't got a drop of Scottish blood in you. What on earth are you doing in Scotland? But racing in Scotland is, to me, what racing in the south of England used to be. There's nothing wrong with racing in the south of England now. But it's quite old-fashioned. It's not backward, but it's old-fashioned. Everyone knows everybody, especially around places like Perth and Ayr and Kelso. There's some really serious sport out on the track, but there's a bit of a party atmosphere off the track. People are determined to enjoy themselves. And it's just maybe the pace of racing life in Scotland and the north of England, to be fair. It's just one step slower than the south of England, which I find very, very attractive. It does mean that getting to the races is not quite so easy. I had a trip to Ayr. I remember I thought the stars were aligned. This was Craig and Boy, which I mentioned, running, and it would have been my late father's 85th birthday. And I remember thinking that's surely part of the whole thing. So I live not a million miles from Birmingham Airport. I got the 9 o'clock flight to Birmingham. Nick Alexander and his wife Rose were there to give me a lift from the racecourse down to from the airport down to the racecourse. Ayr Racecourse, when things resume after the behind closed doors, they do the most fantastic catering for everybody, particularly for owners. The sun was out, the birds were singing. Grant Coburn, our jockey, was in the paddock looking confident. And so everything was absolutely right. I actually had, for me, quite a big bet on the horse as well. He'd run well in his previous 2 races at Wetherby and Haydock. And they're under starters' orders, says the announcer. They're off, which was true in the case of 9 out of 10 of them. But unfortunately, Craig and Boy decided that day that he wasn't going anywhere. So all this effort, Birmingham Airport, Glasgow Airport, Ayr, lunch, blah-de-blah and blah-de-blah. And in fact, he tried it again the following time, tried to refuse, but ended up finishing second. So the great, it's a bit like those James Herriot books used to be called "It Should Never Happen to a Vet," I think, or one of them was called "It Should Never Happen to a Racehorse Owner." But you know that things have got to be bad and things go wrong to make the good days even better than they'd otherwise be.
I can just tell you, thanks to my research yesterday, if you go back far enough, Lysaght was actually prefixed Muck.
Well, there are some Muck Lysaghts around. There's quite a famous Muck Lysaght called Edward, or Ned, who was quite involved in Irish independence in the early part of the 20th century. And he, I think, maintained that the name should have been Muck Lysaght. But we were Lysaght. And people ask me, was there ever a shortening of Lysaght? And there is, your research hasn't been that good, Simon, because you'd have spotted that Lysaght is an anagram of ghastly. So L-Y-S-A-G-H-T becomes G-H-A-S-T-L-Y. And that's one of the few, for a time, until I like to think it became so obviously inappropriate. I was known as Mr. Ghastly at school. And I've always, one of my dreams would be able to name a racehorse. And Mr. Ghastly could easily be a name that I would call a horse. Hopefully he'd be good, so that Ghastly was inappropriate in headlines as well.
Which leads us nicely on. We go back just briefly to the fact that racing has been jettisoned by the BBC, the Times, by and large, other big players. Do you think that it can fall in favour again, or is that it?
Oh, I think it can unquestionably fall in favour again. I dare say, if you actually those people who can, the John Randalls of this world, who can look at racing from 1750 right the way through to whatever the date is when he's considering these things, there have been ups and downs. There have been times when people have been out of love with racing. There have been times when the monarch hasn't been interested in Royal Ascot, I'm sure. And of course, life is all about peaks and troughs, and it is a roller coaster. And what is it that would bring it back? Well, if bring it back into the top of the agenda. If we knew that, we could wave our magic wand and we could get that sorted. At the moment, it's not as popular as it has been. But equally, golf's not as popular as it has been. If you look at the audience figures, football is really, really popular. It seems impossible to imagine that football's going to fall out of favour. But I'm confident that there are peaks and troughs. Quite when it'll happen, we've no idea. But if you look at the big events, the Grand Nationals, the Royal Ascots, then the interest in those type of events, they continue to be high. It's just harder on a day-to-day basis. But perhaps it's actually our expectations have been too high in the past. Those movers and shakers to which I referred earlier on, they were into racing. Winston Churchill was a well-known owner-breeder. Well, you couldn't imagine a politician being like that now. The Queen is clearly the best known, is the best known woman in the world, and she's an owner-breeder. But things do fall in and out of fashion, whether it's jockeys, whether it's trainers, whether it's horses, whether it's stallions, whether it's the sport itself. And hopefully there will be a way back. But maybe we need to concentrate on the Saturdays, on the big events, for them to be big. And then the actual bread and butter stuff that happens during the week has to sort of be more what you might call betting shop fodder. Perhaps, I don't know the solution. If I did, then I'd be applying for a very senior job in racing administration, and I'd be like Admiral Rouse of many years ago, pushing the sport forward. But at the moment, that's not very likely to happen.
One of the things, you've dived headlong into the world of social media, it seems, since you left the BBC. So do you think these days, with all the opportunities to broadcast, people to broadcast themselves, etc., that the big names are no longer that important as they would have been, and that there's a great opportunity for racing to promote itself?
Well, I don't know about it. Yeah, the fact is, Instagram, the fact is, all these things, Twitter, which is the main one that I got into, TikTok, that's got to be the next boundary to have a go at. Facebook, obviously, as well.
These podcasts and things.
And podcasts, yeah. The Cornelius cast comes out every fortnight or so, and hopefully will continue to do so. We can't be sniffy about these things. Colleagues of mine, media colleagues, say, "Oh, I could only get X number of words in the paper, but I got 500 words on the website." Well, the fact is, quite likely, that there are more people looking at the website and have easy access to the website than will be buying the paper. So it's just, things are moving on, and we have to embrace those. And, some of the racecourses have embraced, and racecourse groups have embraced social media spectacularly. Goodwood, the middle of, during the pandemic, there was nothing for Goodwood to do. And they staged a duck race on a river and put them all in the colours of the last. We're giving the names of these ducks on this stream, the names of the horses who won the last 10 Goodwood Cups or something, or whatever they did. Big names from Goodwood, anyway. And those type of innovative things. And you suddenly find yourself getting tens of thousands of hits on that kind of thing. When I left the BBC, I did one of those things that become very fashionable. I have some personal news for you, and did a little video for Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And they got hundreds of thousands of hits. So the answer is, should the 3 o'clock at Newmarket, however important it is, Group 1 be on BBC Radio? Well, obviously it's a great pity that it's not. But perhaps we're judging everything by standards that actually existed in the past, rather than the more modern day ones. So racing must embrace all these things, and gradually it is doing so, and very successfully. Goodwood, I love Goodwood. We all love Goodwood. They've done it particularly successfully.
Okay, so finally, what's on the horizon? What have you got your sights set on in the near future?
Just sort of working away, telling stories, but from storytelling within horse racing from a slightly different angle. Podcasts offer all sorts of possibilities. When I left the BBC was pretty much in the first 3 weeks, month or so of the pandemic. So therefore, there was not much optimism, not much money, people just looking to survive as opposed to thinking forward into the years ahead. But gradually, people are becoming more optimistic, are looking further forward. There is storytelling. Racing has got to get those good stories out. We can't rely on Frankie Dettori for forever. We've got to push the new characters forward, make certain they have a good profile, and I want to be part of that as much as possible. So fingers crossed.
And finally, autobiography.
Oh God, a bit boring, I think. But no, I'd love the challenge of doing a memoir of some sort. Whether especially in an age when books are, well, I say books are less fashionable than they were. My family business, my parents had a bookshop in the town of South Herefordshire town of Ross-on-Wye, and when the internet came along in the 1990s, their friends said, no one will be buying books in the future, but that bookshop continued until they retired for another 15, 20 years. So the fact of the matter is, books in some form will continue to exist, and some kind of a memoir, maybe trying to bring together the various different mediums, whether it's social media, TV, etc., and books as well. Maybe something like that. But let's hope so, and let's keep healthy, and let's keep optimistic and keep moving forward.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to that. Cornelius Lysaght, thank you very much.